right for the unborn. The vice president meets with abortion providers as a U.S. senator challenges misconceptions on the issue of life. Pain at the pump. Lawmakers debate why gasoline prices are so high and who is to blame. The right to free speech. Analysis of the Biden administration's decision to pause its so-called disinformation board. And the Blue House. For the first time in decades, South Korea has opened a historic landmark to the public. On EWTN News Nightly for Thursday, May 19th, 2022. Thank you so much for being with us tonight. I'm Tracy Sable. As President Joe Biden heads overseas, Vice President Kamala Harris meets virtually with abortion providers. Since day one, the Biden administration has tried to reverse pro-life protections put in place by former President Donald Trump. White House correspondent Owen Jensen reports. Owen.
Tracy, good evening to you. Today, Vice President Kamala Harris issued multiple warnings on what she claims will happen if Roe goes away, that other rights would be restricted, that there would be a direct assault on self-determination. And she blasted a brand new Oklahoma law that strongly protects the unborn.
Vice President Kamala Harris tells abortion providers the Biden administration has their unwavering support.
At its core, this is about our future as a nation, about whether we live in a country where the government can interfere in personal decisions.
And while the Supreme Court has yet to officially release its decision that could ditch Roe v. Wade, the White House is already preparing for what comes next.
So this, when and if it happens, will be an extreme step backward. And it represents a threat, not just to women, but to all Americans.
But pro-lifers are not deterred. Governor Pete Ricketts tweeted, "Nebraska is a pro-life state. If Roe is overturned, we will take every step we can to protect our preborn babies." And before President Joe Biden departed for a summit in Asia, he hosted the leaders of Finland and Sweden in the Rose Garden, as those nations seek NATO membership in the wake of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. The president called it a momentous day, adding, "The United States strongly supports their joining the defensive alliance."
Two proud, independent countries exercising the sovereign rights all states possess to decide their own security.
The president also said NATO is committed to a Europe whole, free, and at peace.
Today, there is no question NATO is relevant, it is effective, and is more needed now than ever.
As for the president's six-day trip to Asia, talks will involve trade, growing concerns about North Korea's nuclear program, and China's military assertiveness. At the White House, Owen Jensen, EWTN News Nightly.
Well, the Department of Homeland Security is pausing its Disinformation Governance Board after receiving backlash about the board hindering freedom of speech. DHS Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas said the board's aim was to stop disinformation from impacting U.S. elections, but lawmakers and the public alike raised concerns over censorship and policing of political speech. The pause comes just 3 weeks after DHS announced the board's creation. And joining me now to discuss is Mike Davis, founder and president of the Internet Accountability Project. Mike, welcome. Great to be with you today. Let's talk a little bit more about this. DHS has not formally shut the board down, but says it is being paused so an advisory council can review it. What more do you know about this?
So DHS just needs to get rid of this thing altogether. It was a terrible idea. Apparently no other federal agency wanted this, so it got dumped on DHS. This is a clear First Amendment problem to have government officials out there working with big tech like they did during the COVID pandemic to label things misinformation that ended up being true, and then using that to censor, silence, deplatform their critics. And it tended to be Republicans and conservatives who were on the censorship end of that.
Mike, do you think this will kind of resurface in another form or fashion? You know,
I think that you're starting to see with today's left that they don't want to debate ideas. They don't want to have the free market of ideas. So they want to use code words like disinformation, misinformation, democracy. What they're trying to do is just silence the other side, silence conservatives, silence people with whom they disagree, because all they care about is power. And that's what this is about. This has nothing to do with misinformation or disinformation. This has to do with power. Americans, for the first 250 years of our republic, have been able to figure out what's true and what's not true. We don't need we don't need 30-year-old government officials at DHS helping us figure out what's true and not true. They need to get rid of this terrible idea.
On a different note, sort of a pro-abortion group's account on TikTok that was permanently banned for violating the social media platform's terms of service. Well, that was just reinstated just days after that. I want to get your thoughts on that.
This is very dangerous, what these protesters are doing by doxing Supreme Court justices and their families at their homes. It is illegal under 18 U.S.C. 1507. It is federal obstruction of justice to protest at a federal judge's home for the purpose of intimidating them on a pending case. In 2020, U.S. District Judge Esther Salas had her 20-year-old son, Daniel, murdered at her home, and her husband, Mark, was shot and had to undergo numerous surgeries because some nut job showed up at her house. You cannot have federal judges' home addresses exposed like this. And it's just telling that big tech has encouraged this. You saw Jen Psaki from the White House platform cheering these protesters on, these illegal protesters on, and big tech is not doing anything about these Supreme Court justices' homes being doxxed and putting their families in grave danger. They've had to move Supreme Court justices and their families out of their homes.
Yeah, this is really, really concerning. What do you think can be done about this if, others don't kind of step in and do something?
Well, I'll tell you, the Attorney General Merrick Garland, who was a former federal judge, he's just completely fallen down on the job. It's a dereliction of duty. It is totally reckless, probably intentional, what he's doing, allowing these abortion industry-funded protests to go put pressure on these federal judges at their homes. He should be stepping up. He should be ordering the Deputy Attorney General Lisa Monaco, the FBI Director Chris Wray, the Assistant Attorney General for the Criminal Division Ken Polite, the U.S. attorneys in D.C., Eastern District of Virginia, and Maryland. They're all falling down on the job, and they need to step up. They need to start making arrests. It is unacceptable to show up at a federal judge's home to try to intimidate them on a pending case. It is obstruction of justice, and they do not have a First Amendment right to be there. It's against federal statute, 18 U.S.C. 1507, and the litigants' due process rights on a pending case trump a very narrow time, place, and manner restriction on these deranged abortion industry-funded protesters.
Mike, we have probably about a minute or so left. A lot going on, as you know, in particular when it comes to big tech as well. Wondering what else you're following.
Well, with big tech, we're seeing with Elon Musk, whether he's going to come through, this benevolent billionaire is going to come through, close this deal, and turn Twitter and back into a free speech platform, make Twitter great again, or if he's going to get chased off and Twitter's going to continue its censorship business as usual, where they're working with the Biden White House to censor people under the guise of misinformation and disinformation to silence people, their critics, their Republican conservative critics. So I hope it goes through, but the bigger problem is that we need to break up big tech, and there's a bill working its way through Congress right now with Grassley and Klobuchar, my former boss Chuck Grassley, and Democrat Amy Klobuchar, that would bring much needed reforms to big tech. So let's hope that passes by Memorial Day.
Well, Mike, thanks so much for coming on, and we appreciate your analysis.
Thank you.
Well, inflation is at a 40-year high, and some analysts predict gas prices could top $6 a gallon by August. On Capitol Hill, the U.S. House has passed a bill targeting price gouging by oil and gas companies. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi says that they have been raking in huge profits for years at the expense of the public.
Again and again, we see gas prices rise. Sometimes when the cost of oil drops, oil prices drop, and price gouging needs to be stopped. This is a major exploitation of the consumer.
The bill gives the Federal Trade Commission greater power to crack down on market manipulation, including hefty fines. But Senator Lisa Murkowski, lead Republican on the Energy Committee, blames Biden administration policies.
This is not something where you can just blame big oil and go after price gouging. This is not something where you can attack others when it is failed policies that this administration has put in place.
Others agree. Senator Ted Cruz says high gas prices are all part of the administration's plan to force people to buy electric vehicles.
This was deliberate. This isn't an accident. This isn't an unintended side effect. This is exactly what Joe Biden promised he would do, and it's what he's done.
Senator Roger Marshall tells EWTN News Nightly President Biden has to own up to his failed policies.
The Americans know that this oil and gas shortage, this decreased supply has been created by Joe Biden. The first thing they need to do is recognize a problem and then set American energy free, and we'll solve this problem.
Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer plans to start work on the package next week. Republicans are likely to block the bill because it does not include fossil fuel production. Coming up, after Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen says abortion helps single black mothers, a pro-lifer responds. U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen says eliminating the right to an abortion will have damaging effects on the economy. During her recent testimony on Capitol Hill, she emphasized black mothers would be most affected. Her remarks drew an immediate response from pro-lifers, including from Senator Tim Scott, who wrote an op-ed saying in part, quote, "If abortion is our first and best answer to ensure that women and low-income families can thrive economically, the United States has reached one of its darkest times in our history." And joining now to discuss is Reverend Dean Nelson, Executive Director of Human Coalition Action and Chairman of the Douglas Leadership Institute. Reverend Nelson, great to see you. Thanks for coming back on. First off, when you heard those comments by Secretary Yellen, what did you think? What went through your mind?
It was chilling to hear from someone in her position. Connecting it somehow to the economy was disturbing. I mean, we've heard these kind of comments before. I was proud that Senator Scott stood up and challenged those ideas. This fundamentally flawed viewpoint somehow that some children are worth having and some children are not is horrible and doesn't really belong in this discussion. I was pleased that he stood up and that so many pro-lifers were quick to respond as well.
Yeah, and Senator Scott, as you know, responded to Secretary Yellen at the time, sharing his own experience growing up with a single black mother living in poverty. Yet, despite financial challenges, he said he was still able to achieve the American dream. Your thoughts on the senator's response?
Well, it's a great response, and it's true. We know this very well at Human Coalition and the work that we do serving women and rescuing children all across the country. One data point that we recently pulled is 76% of women seeking abortion say that they would choose to parent if their circumstances were different. We've heard powerful testimonies of women throughout our existence that have shared similar stories as Senator Scott and his mother. One of the most profound is one of the most wealthiest black women in America, actually a media mogul, Kathy Hughes, shares with pride how she rejected abortion as a teenager, raised her son while running her business and became one of the wealthiest black women in the country and turned that business over to her son, who now runs that business today. We are about supporting women and encouraging them to overcome obstacles, not about killing children. You don't solve the issue of poverty by killing the poor.
Absolutely. I have a question for you. I mean, why do you think this narrative is being pushed that, lower income, single women, in particular women of color, should choose to end their preborn baby's life as a way to improve their economic situation? And what can be done to change that narrative and better support these women?
Well, I think it's driven twofold. One, it's driven by a flawed ideology that's not rooted in our Christian ethic, where we believe that all of us, regardless of race, regardless of income, regardless of circumstance, are made in the image and likeness of God. It rejects that fundamentally. Secondly, there's a billion-dollar industry that is pushing this narrative. Planned Parenthood, as you well know, is over $1 billion enterprise with $1 billion in assets. I think that money is driving part of this discussion, and what we can do to combat it. I think that we need to hear the stories of Kathy Hughes, the president of Democrats for Life of America. Monica Sparks has a similar harrowing story of she and her sister overcoming that with a mother that was strung out on drugs. I believe that we need to affirm the dignity of all human beings and just leave it at the fact that women need more than abortion. We do better than that as a society, and that's what Human Coalition and many other organizations do by helping women in these difficult circumstances.
We have about a minute or so left, Reverend. Before I let you go, though, I'd like to get your thoughts, kind of where we go from here and the future of the pro-life movement, and also the work that your organization is doing.
I believe, as we have been praying and thinking for many, many years, that we would see the end of Roe versus Wade. I think that some of the great stories are yet to be told from churches and from community leaders like the Catholic Church, as well as the Church of God in Christ, an African-American-led denomination that are working to find ways to be solutionists, to provide help for women that find themselves in difficult circumstances. There will be half of our states will likely have restrictions on abortion, and half of our states will likely have little restriction. And so there's a lot of work to be done through the church and through organizations like Human Coalition, rescuing children, but also providing services to women who find themselves in need.
Reverend Nelson, thank you so much. Always great to have you on, and thank you for what you do. God bless you.
Thank you so much. God bless you.
Ukrainian fighters who were cornered inside of a steel plant in Mariupol are surrendering to Russian forces. Russia claims more than 1,700 defenders have registered as prisoners of war. The International Red Cross is assisting to assure their humane treatment. Russia can now claim complete control of the vital port city, which is seen as one of its primary military objectives. While China's largest city is slowly emerging from a strict COVID-19 lockdown, Shanghai is easing its latest pandemic restrictions that have kept most residents at home for more than 6 weeks. Authorities will cautiously reopen public transportation, but a zero COVID approach still prevails, which has hurt economic growth and frustrated the city's 25 million people. The former presidential palace in South Korea's capital is now open to the public. It's known as the Blue House for its distinctive roof tiles. By relocating Defense Ministry offices, South Korea's new president is allowing public access for the first time in more than 7 decades. The Blue House residence was built in the late 1930s when Japan controlled the country. Up next, a Protestant pastor from England tells us why he recently met with Pope Francis. Pope Francis welcomed new ambassadors to the Holy See.
L'appoggio umanitario offerto e il senso di fraternità provato per coloro che soffrono.
In his remarks, the Holy Father urged the four nations to never lose hope in efforts to build a world in which fraternity and mutual understanding will prevail. He greeted envoys from Pakistan, the United Arab Emirates, Burundi, and Qatar. Finally, tonight, a group of Catholics and Protestants are meeting with officials at the Vatican. The group is led by Archbishop Reese from Poland and Protestant Pastor David Hathaway from the United Kingdom. Yesterday, the group met Pope Francis. The delegation is preparing to hold a joint prayer event in Poland in July. Joining us now from Rome is David Hathaway, a Protestant pastor and president of the Eurovision mission to Europe. Pastor Hathaway, thank you for your time today. Can you tell us more about meeting Pope Francis, and what did you discuss, and what was it like to meet him?
Well, it was very interesting to meet him, but it's quite critical because at the moment I'm working very much with the Catholic churches in Ireland, and I'm the guest here of the Archbishop from Łódź in Poland, Gregory Rees, and he asked the Pope if he would like to speak to me, introduced me. And the Pope, first of all, encouraged me and thanked me for my work in evangelism, because I've been evangelizing in the former Soviet Union for 61 years. And then I said that one of the big things which I've been able to do, which hasn't happened in any other country in the world, after the Russian invasion of Ukraine in 2014, I was able to call all the Christian denominations together. And that's a miracle, because I had Catholic, I had Orthodox, I had all the evangelicals, the Pentecostal, the Charismatic, every single denomination. And I asked them one question. I said, look, we can work together in prayer if we forget all religious doctrines, and if you will accept only two things. One, the only authority in the church is the Bible, and secondly, the only salvation is in the name of Jesus. They all agreed, and for 6 years we had prayer meetings with 10,000 people. And the interesting thing is that the people who were praying, leading the prayers, were the heads of every single denomination on the platform. That's a miracle. And I'm convinced that the reason that the nation of Ukraine has been so united in its defense against Russia is because of the power that comes when a nation unites in prayer. And so the Pope encouraged me, and after I'd shared that with him, I said to him, would you like me to pray? Because God has given me a powerful ministry of healing. I've twice been healed of serious cancer without any medical treatment, only through the power of prayer. And the Pope said, yes, I would like you to pray. And so I prayed with him. That was my interview.
That is incredible. Thank you for sharing all of that with us. And speaking of prayer, can you tell us a little bit more about the prayer event taking place in Poland in July?
Yes, in July the 2nd, what we've got is we've been holding these days of prayer in the Ukraine, but now, because of the situation in Poland, where we have more than 3 million refugees, what we have called for is a day of prayer for the refugees, and that God will stop the war. Now, this is very important. We will bring the Christian churches together and the people, and this prayer, I believe, will encourage and help these refugees, and I believe God will answer prayer and stop the war in the Ukraine.
Pastor Hathaway, thank you so much for your time today. It has been a pleasure speaking with you. God bless you. And we thank you for watching tonight. For the entire EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Tracy Sable. Good night and God bless.